Alright, so here's a video on how to do all of the Git stuff and kind of a few things related to that. So first of all, many of you have already forked this repository, which is great. Very happy with that. But for any of you who haven't done this kind of thing before, or who just generally don't know how to fork a repository, basically what you're going to do is you're going to follow the link that I gave you for this repository, right? Mine is the one with the number. This is the master repository, basically, is the one that I own, and so you guys are going to be forking from this one, and basically it's an alternate version of this repository that you can make your own changes to in your own local device and push all those changes up to the cloud of your own forked version of this repository. And then if you have changes, or when you have changes that you need to send over to the master version of the repository, you're going to be sending in pull requests from your repository to my repository. Right, and then in order to get yourself up to date, you're going to put in a pull request from my repository to your repository. Right, so anyways, to get this started, you're going to follow the link. It should open up to this repository, and then up here you should be able to click this fork button. I can't because I own the repository, but you're going to fork the repository, and then it's going to create your own version of the repository, and from there you should be able to go in here, copy the URL, right, and then in Git Kraken you can open up a new tab and you can say, hey, clone a repo, put in the URL, which again at this point should be a URL of your own forked version of the repository, right? And then you can select a local folder location to put this repository, name it whatever. I would probably just keep the name as the name of the repository, just for the sake of simplicity, and then you would clone the repo, right? So that should get you your own version, your own forked version of this repository, and it should allow you to have access to all the files and all that stuff on your own local device, right? Now, suppose you make some changes, or you work on something, right, and you have a Maya file that you want to upload to the cloud, right? So, sorry. So you guys should have, at this point, right, your own repository. And with that, when I created this, I put a whole bunch of basically filler, some filler files, just all named temp.txt. They're text files that are totally empty at the base of each folder that didn't have something in it. Just that way, as you fork the repository and get that stuff on your own device, you guys should have this same file folder structure on your own local device. That way you know where to put things as you're doing stuff, right? So suppose I work on the Canon, right? Then the Canon asset, I should come into the repository, go into Maya, should be under assets, props, and that'd be a dungeon prop, right? So it'd be in here. I would save the Maya file, and it should be a maya.ma file, not maya.mb. Basically, the difference is that a .ma file is going to be cheaper to have on the repository, especially if we're making changes to the file, and it's going to take up a lot less storage space, right? And on top of that, it's iterable. We can make iterations on the file, which is always great when you're doing this kind of stuff, and that's kind of the reason why we use Git in the first place, is so we can have version control, right? So make sure to save the file as a Maya ASCII file instead of a Maya binary file. Just make sure it ends in .ma, right? So I save this here, and then I come in here and it says, oh, I have a file that I want to commit, right? I have this file right here. So, you guys have probably made commits before, but you put in a commit summary, making a commit, right? And you stage those changes, And you guys should have your own dev branches to be pushing these changes to, right? If you don't know how to do that, then you can create a branch, right? Enter the branch name, and then push that before you actually commit any changes to it, just so that that branch exists on the cloud, right? I'm not going to be committing this, but that's basically what you do, right? So then you would commit those changes, they should show up here, and then you would push it. So the first time you make those changes, right, your little icon here that has the check mark next to it, which indicates this is the branch you've checked out, it should move up to the last commit that you've made, and it would have the little computer device, but it wouldn't have that little icon, right? And that indicates, hey, this is where you're up to on your local device, but if there's no icon next to it, then those changes don't exist on your own, on the cloud, right, for your own version of the repository. So then you would just need to push those changes, and that pushes all that stuff so that the online version of your repository is up to date with your local version, right? So that's how you would make changes to your own thing. So suppose I've made some changes and I've gotten my stuff approved in class, right? My assignments got approved, and now I need to make what's called a pull request, so that, right, because I'm you, and I don't have the master version of this repository. I have a forked version of this repository, right? So if I want the master version of the repository to have these changes, you need to put in a pull request. And a pull request is you saying, hey, I have this information that you don't have that is up to date on my version of the repository. I would like to request that you pull in these changes to your version of the repository so that you can have them, right? And then from there, everybody can make a pull request from my master version of the repository to your forked version of the repository, and everybody can get up to date, right? And then we're all happy. So how you do that is on this left part here, you can put in a pull request, right? And you would say from your repo. So suppose I'm Sean, right? And I want to do from my version of the repository to me, the master version of the repository, right? Your changes that you're making should be on your dev branch, and they should go over to my dev branch. Unless you've made some really significant stuff and you want to put it onto your main branch, then you can go from your main branch to my dev branch. You're never going to be putting in pull requests to my main branch. You're always going to be putting them to my dev branch, and when I feel that it's an appropriate time, I can merge my dev branch into my main branch to get those changes there, right? But every time you put in a pull request, you're going to go from yours to, whatever branch you feel, to my version onto the dev branch, right? And please put a title or a description, and just say, I worked on the canon, right? And whatever else you worked on, right? And then you can create the pull request down here, right? That will create a pull request for me that I can actually see in here. And I can say, oh, look, somebody sent me a pull request. And I can go in here, I can review your changes, and then I can leave you a comment saying, hey, I can't accept this yet, you need to make these changes, or hey, this looks great, I'll accept this right away. And then I can choose whether or not to accept that pull request, right? So that's how you do that. A couple things to keep in mind. When you are saving your files, first of all, please try and save it to the right folder location, right? Whenever you're making an asset, it should go into the asset folder. And then if it's a character, environment, or a prop, choose that and then go into whatever else. And then if there's not already a folder created for that thing, you can create a new folder. If there is a folder for it, save it in that folder, right? That's going to keep things nice and clean, and it'll make it easy for everyone to be making references to other things when we're putting together scenes. We're going to end up having a lot of assets throughout this whole project, so as much cleanliness as we can get in our file structure and all of that stuff, and in our naming conventions and everything, that's great. In terms of naming conventions, one thing to absolutely avoid is don't put spaces in your naming conventions. In the modern day, that doesn't usually cause issues, because stuff is usually more prepared for that. Different softwares are usually more prepared for that kind of thing. But every once in a while, you can get issues if you have spaces in your file names. So just to avoid that entirely,